Make sure that works. And I tend to roam around a bit, so I might just rotate this. Yeah. Don't let it stop you fidgeting on your phones. Yeah. And for those of you online, you'll be able to see me and see the slide share. And my understanding is the microphone is in the laptop. So for those of you online, if you can't hear me, just put it up on the chat, and I'll go and stand back behind the lectern. So just be aware of that. So a bit of background about this program. It's called Making Data Count. It's been going on for about 2 years now, and the best way to get to follow it and to see what's going on with the Making Data Count movement is Twitter, actually. And I really recommend following Sam Riley, at Sam Riley, or looking for the hashtag #PlotTheDots, which I've left it on there. The other one is me, but you'll get far more general national information from Sam Riley and Plot the Dots. And if you were to look on Twitter now, and encourage you to do so, you'll see hospitals, organisations, departments, services up and down the country, and actually increasingly internationally, looking at the presentation I'm about to show you and starting to adopt it into their business as usual. So that's the best place to follow it. We've been doing this now for about 2 years, and it was led and developed by Sam Riley, who's the head of data analytics at NHS England. Do you want to speak louder? Yeah. I'll stand close to the mic. And see if they still hackle. So Sam Riley set up this program. Been going for about 2 years, and it's getting really, really popular. When we checked a few months ago, it was the most clicked on web page at NHS Improvement. And by some stretch, this is the biggest support offer that people come to me and Sam asking for when they're doing improvement work. By some margin, this is the most popular subject. And a bit of history about it, and I think we're coming on for well over 50 organisations that have started to look at this in a serious way. Bit of history: statistical process control has been around for decades. There's nothing new about statistical process control. But my understanding is that historically in the NHS, it's become the domain of academics or the improvement peaks, and it's not really being pushed into services for your everyday folk delivering healthcare as a business as usual way of looking at our data. As a result, over the years, when we started looking at data and data for improvement, we tended to just call the analyst or forward the request of the email on, rather than taking accountability and responsibility at a service level. So I might just have to stand in the laptop.
I'll see if I can swap the microphone to this one. Bear with me a second.
Oh, good. Okay. So technique, bringing it to everyday folk that are delivering services and showing you how to use it for the way you manage the performance of your service, use it for both assurance and improvement. And what I'm going to do is run almost an identical session as what I do with executive boards in NHS providers. I'm not going to dumb it down or build it up in any way. I'm just going to almost give you a replicated session. And then towards the end, I'll start applying some of the SPC techniques to your own data. In the build-up to this event, I put a request out for some of you to send your performance data in my direction, and we just stick it through some SPC charts to see if it generates any discussion. So a few of you did do that. I have some of your data. We put it into SPC. We'll show it back. A bit like your other speakers today, I know almost nothing about radiotherapy, but I can show you the data and let you guys discuss and facilitate in that way. I should also add that where I was talking about this becoming everyday use, I do practice what I preach. I'm not a data analyst in my professional life. I'm a generalist NHS manager that got involved in improvement, and I've spent more time as an army officer than I have in the NHS. But what I like to do is take data, bring it down into layman's terms, and help you work with it and use it. So I'll take you to a point, and if we get incredibly technical, I'll probably have to make a note and bring in someone far more experienced than I am on the subject. Let's see how we go. So Did you be successful with the microphone?
Yes, it's on the mic.
It's on with the mic. Okay.
Yeah, so if you talk into the camera phone.
Oh, it's the clicker now, isn't it?
Is it not?
It was literally working about. Oh, no. Sorry, bear with me. I'm back on a safe. It's got a safety catch.
It's because that laser is so powerful. Honestly, you blind somebody with it.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? So, skip past that. Okay, so whether you don't need to read that, by the way. It'll zoom up in there. Whether you're at an executive level or you've just entered the NHS, when you're making decisions in your service based on data, you're under time pressure, right? You've got limited time, limited resources. You need to make relatively quick, informed decisions. And everything I'm going to show you is currently in the NHS right now, and some of it's bizarre. This is a page from an organisational board report. This is an organisational board report. If you can't read it, it's looking at a friends and family test score in emergency care. And if we look at it in some more detail, what we usually find in our performance reporting is we tend to look at like 1 month trends. What happened last month? What happened last week? What happened yesterday?
John, sorry, I don't think people can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm just going to stand next to the lectern and lecture you.
Let's do it this way.
Okay, let's try like this. So often our performance reporting looks something like this. We're looking at data from a previous month, a previous week, and we tend to have laser time. We tend to have an indication as to whether that trend has gone up or down. Okay, and we often have a narrative that's attached to that. So in this particular example, the operational manager has told us that the friends and family test score has increased from 95.36% to 95.76%. And my rather rhetorical question to you is that helpful or is it distracting? And do feel free to heckle and engage as you go, because of course that's quite distracting. You know, busy week, delivering services, 1 million metrics. To know that your friends and family test score has gone up by whatever that is, 0.54%, is that helpful? Sometimes it might be, sometimes it won't be. But we see this really, really frequently. We see 2-point data comparisons supported by factually correct but unhelpful narrative. And of course, as the late Brucey used to say, things are, if you've got a data point, right, things are either going to go higher or they're going to go lower. So when you're looking at today's data compared to last month or last week, don't be surprised when the data point goes higher or lower. I mean, it could be the same, I guess, technically, but generally speaking, it is going to go higher or lower. Don't be surprised when it does, and certainly don't stick a narrative on it telling the world this month is higher than last month. Of course it is. It is either going to be higher or lower, right? That's really unhelpful narrative. I'm now going to show you a series of data, of charts from real NHS board reports that are out there. They've been anonymized, real reports. I want you to pretend that you're in some form of decision-making committee, board level, service level, team level, whatever. And this is in front of you. Have a look at the charts and just take 30 seconds to a minute and come to some sort of understanding about what's going on. And these start ridiculous and get better. Every single one of them has come from a real NHS board report. So, number one. Either as a table or just heckle out loud. I'll keep it up there for 30 seconds to a minute and we'll discuss. So it's pretty. People often say I'll hang it up. It's good a piece of art as any.
We're not doing too bad, I think. Other than
it helps to see the spectrum of praxis, doesn't it? Sorry?
I was looking at the bottom.
The bit that goes below zero,
Yeah.
that little
Well,
iceberg.
there is that,
Yeah, what's that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are we able to understand this in any form?
No.
I can't even be bothered to try and work.
You can't even be bothered. Absolutely. And what we've tended to do when we see something like this is just sort of assume, oh well, I'm not a statistician. Maybe I'm missing something here. Let's just call the stat guys and see if they can present this for us. Or maybe we let the person that wrote it, the specific operational manager, just work with that themselves, and maybe they get it. But we tend to switch off, right? We tend to not bother, really. Was there another point?
I was going to say, I wouldn't have chosen that particular type of chart.
No, I think it's fair to say. Absolutely, but this was being presented at a board level. We're talking multi-million-pound, taxpayer-funded NHS organisations, executives making decisions based on this kind of chart. They've probably all got degrees, master's degrees, 20, 30 years experience. Not challenging this. What do we think about this one?
Is this from Paul?
Well, this is a fair point. This could actually be any number of organisations. There are hundreds, tens of organisations working on these.
I don't want to kind of jump ahead too much, but one of the things that I've only been in a senior management position for just over a year now, and one of the things about accountability reporting is that a lot of it, the purpose for it isn't making a decision. The purpose of it is to demonstrate that you've been accountable.
So assurance.
Yeah.
And if I was being very, very cynical, we are aware that our managers have a very limited amount of time to read the reports. And if you stuff them full of stuff like this, all they will really do is check that there is a report. Tick a box, yes, they've received it. And we all kind of move on with our lives.
And with limited time, what they might do is just look at the final number, and is that number on target or not? And go fast from there. Absolutely agree. Absolutely. And what I want to get to in a minute is showing you how statistical process control just wades through this nonsense and takes you to the point. But I absolutely agree. This could be any number. I mean, if you were to try to work with this, what do? You might instinctively just try and look at the biggest numbers, maybe ask a question, look at the smallest numbers, maybe ask a question there. You certainly need more than a minute to look at it and make any conclusion. Really tricky. It's a bit better laid out than the last chart. Would you agree? No disagreement at the back. There's equally as useless.
Rollo called it more than half the previous one. Rollo, one of the virtual, he said the previous chart is like a piece of modern art.
Yeah. With some of those charts, like that, we've done a bit of digging around and asked people, how did that happen? And I'll talk about it in a bit later. But it seems to be that some people have found that just because Excel lets you do it, seems to be the answer. We have our raw data set, click chart, hit go, that comes out. And we go, well, must be good. Chuck it out there. So it's amazing how high it can get before it gets really challenged. And it's one of the reasons now why this presentation is being delivered with boards and non-exec directors in the NHS as they join, so that we can get straight to the point and equip them with the challenge, so that they can flag this up quickly at their level and then support their organisations to do this better. So, what about this one? And why is that? Yeah, so we've got colour, not for the first time. We certainly had colour in the first slide, but we've got colour in a slightly more productive way that's directing us to intuitively green is good, red is bad. So as if you're accountable or trying to make an improvement in the service, you might presumably look at the red and think about how do we make red green, presumably. Can you read any of the items on the left-hand column there, some of the services? I think I'll go into some of them in detail in a bit and look at it. But what about general medicine? What are we thinking with that?
Awesome.
It's awesome. 100% green running all across there.
There must be a hack in the statistics.
Yeah.
They had a reference then, I think. Everything referenced to them.
What do we see the two columns on the right hand side? You see there's that data comparison, so it's either gone up or it's gone down. And we've got, we've quantified that to some extent with the percentage in the last column.
But is that the trend from the last 2 months, or is it the trend over the whole?
It's the last 2 months. A really, really common.
Doesn't
And
actually.
if you're
Common
100%
mistake.
genuinely the whole time, you're not good, because it doesn't flag it up at the end as any different.
Do you see charts like this in your services today? This one is far, far more common. The first two are true, but on the ridiculous. This is far more common practice. Yeah.
It just looks like respiratory is doing really badly, but actually, over the year, they got better. They might have just had a month that wasn't, but we don't know why.
Yeah. Do you see that sort of fall from the bottom there? So it looks like you've had a period of red, and then there's been this patch of green, maybe a blip at the end, but you might eyeball that and think respiratory have made improvements. But you're having to really eyeball that quite closely. It's not jumping out at you.
Part of the problem is that 1 or 2 patients will make the difference between that 91.5% and this target.
Potentially, yeah.
I do breaches every month for my service, and it's amazing how much difference one patient will make.
Yeah. So you want a total, an absolute number.
Yeah.
Okay. But we're agreed. This is far more common. We see this. What about this page? So this is a mental health key performance indicator. But let's assume you've just done a lot of hours of work. It's at the end of the day. You've got a 100-page report. This is page 56. How much of your attention is this page receiving? They're doing fine. Yeah. Skip straight over. Let's look for some red potentially. Yeah.
Actually, some of the targets are really low. Or are they? Is a 50% target a good or a bad?
Yeah. Are those targets valid?
They are if you're getting like 59, 57, but where you're getting 100%, 83, 189, 50% is a rubbish target.
Yeah. Just as an FYI, those targets are national standards, so they're not locally determined. They're not kidding themselves. They're just taking national targets in this instance. But are any of these targets even valid? From another point of view, we're busy, limited time and resources. How much do we care if they're valid? We're very green, and we don't have the regulator on our back. We're not having a performance conversation with tricky customers. We can focus on our service, potentially. Now I'm going to show you for the first time today a statistical process control chart. These are 4 SPC charts. This is what they look like. I'm sure some of you know lots about SPC, some of you might not be particularly familiar. Regardless, what's your gut telling you when you look at these charts? Are any of them drawing your attention?
Much easier to see what the trend has been.
For sure. We're looking at a visual trend line for the first time, really, out of any of our examples.
Does that software will show when something's statistically significant? So you've got a pattern like this within 1/2, within 5, within 1/2.
Okay, you're looking for rule break patterns, so we'll cover that in a moment. Usually what I hear, yeah, is
like it's failing.
Yeah, so
It's not, because the target is so low.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. If we look at this bottom left chart, technically it's not failing. You see the red line at the bottom is the target. All the data's above it, so it's giving you green all day long. You're above target, but it warrants your attention, right? Something's going off course there, and you would be forgiven for going straight to the bottom left-hand corner. And if you knew nothing about IAPS treatment at all, even as a patient co-designer or a non-exec director or someone wandering into service, you go, oh, hang about, what's going on there? I know nothing about radiotherapy, but what's going on with that metric? Yeah. and quite right. Now, when we presented this to the NHS board in question last year, we reminded them that this data set, these charts, are the same as those. It's the same data. The only thing we've done is added more history to the data. There's more history on these charts, but all of that data is in those charts. And you should have seen their faces sink when they realized that if you'd have asked them the previous week, they were, glossing straight over that page on the report, had complete assurance these services are fine. But when they looked at it through statistical process control, actually, this warrants our attention. I have 6 weeks. We need to go and ask questions and have some focused time and effort with them. And suddenly they didn't quite have so much assurance as they thought they had. Any hackles? And this is just exaggerated that point on the chart on the bottom left-hand corner. What I'll go into in more detail with SPC is how we can simplistically color code the charts so that when you see flashing orange, it just attracts your attention. And we'll discuss rules briefly in a moment. But what you've got going on here is something called special cause variation, heading downwards, which in this metric is a bad direction. Special cause variation warrants your attention, and we'll cover that in a second. Okay, so do you remember that original red, amber, green table where we couldn't see the services so much? We'll just go into more detail, and I'll apply an SPC chart to each of those, not all of them, but a couple of those services. So we looked at general surgery, blown up there. Eyeballing that, it's very red. We'd probably be having some sort of performance management conversation with the operational manager, asking the clinicians what we can do to make red green, or at least amber, essentially. The trend is showing that it's getting worse from last month at the end. If we take those data points, stick them into an SPC chart, it looks like this. So up is good, right? Up is good. The target is whatever that is, 95%, let's say, the red line. So we're still off target, which is going to flash up as red with your chief operating officer. But are we having the same conversation now as what we were with just the red, amber, green table? And why is that? We've got context, so we've got some understanding of the timeline, right? The time series, and we can see them relative to each other, which is showing a trend. Yeah. And even if you knew nothing about general surgery, knew nothing about the NHS, we can see that something's improved there, right? And it's improved to a degree of special cause variation. And as a sort of a decision maker involved in the service, at the very least, if we know nothing, we could just ask, what happened there that was so good? What could we learn and what could we share with other services? What's so great? Are we having a negative conversation with that service? They're off target. NHS improvement is on the phone. But we're not really having a negative conversation, are we, anymore, in a way that we would have been before?
I know you've got more data on the graph than you have in the box.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll show you a statistical process job. We just dump as much data as we possibly can in, because it's one of those scenarios where more is better. You get more context, more history for the trend. And it raises the point, in a lot of performance that we talk about, we tend to artificially just segment our data. So we just look at the financial year, as if April is just totally disconnected to March. We just pretend like that year didn't happen and start a new 12-month data set. With SPC, we try and stick as many data points as we can, show as much history so that we get that bigger picture. I'll show you some more examples. So again, rheumatology, just like general surgery, generally failing, I assume. Red across the board, the trend is showing it's going down, or the trend on this one. Stick it into an SPC chart. Totally different story. totally different story. So rheumatology in this case is failing its target, but it's also getting worse in its performance. To all intents and purposes, if we're looking at that red, amber, green table as a chief operating officer for some oversight, we're dumping rheumatology in the same category as we are general surgery. But there's a completely different story going on here. Completely different story.
School holidays.
We'll come on to that in a second. Actually, we'll hold that thought. We'll come on to that. Yeah. So there's some real obvious perils to using red, amber, green tables and not applying time series data, statistical process control in our everyday understanding for assurance of performance. And we can use it for improvement as well. Now, just going to run a quick exercise. Bear with me. So imagine John and Mary. Mary's just got herself a new job working at Sainsbury's, and she's a bit weird like me. She's going to start counting the time it takes her to get back from work on a daily basis. At the same time, her husband John has got 2 weeks leave, and he's decided to go and have a jolly in Spain playing golf. So John's out of the country, she's started a new job, and she starts plotting the time that it takes her to get home. So she measures the first week, and it looks like this. So the time it takes her to get back, you can see that it's round about 7 o'clock, round about 7 p.m. The first one's showing 10 past 7, 5:27, 7 o'clock, and so forth, right? John then comes back from his holiday. He's still got a week of leave, doesn't know what to do with himself. But he thinks, well, I'll help out Mary. She's started a new job. I'll cook a dinner every day of the week while I'm doing nothing. And he asks Mary, well, what time do you want dinner for? When did you get back home from work yesterday? She says, well, I got home at 7 o'clock. So John then prepares dinner for 7 o'clock the next day. And Mary pitches up at 10 to 7. And he's there still cutting veg. And he says, you know, Mary, what are you doing? I'm trying to do something nice for you, but you've come back early. I'm still cooking dinner. I wanted to get it on the table for you. The next day he prepares dinner for 10 to 7. He thinks, not this time. Mary comes in at 7 o'clock and dinner's been on the table going cold for 10 minutes. And John's getting more irate. What's going on here? I'm trying to be nice. Dinner's going cold. The next day he prepares dinner for 7 o'clock. And no surprises, Mary pitches up at a different time. Mary turns up at 5 past. Dinner's going cold again for the second night in a row. John's getting even more irate. I should change the name on this example. But John's getting more and more irate. And the next day he prepares dinner for 5 past 7 so that he doesn't get into that problem. And she's there 10 minutes early at 5 to 7. And he's getting more irate, more confused. And we'll stop there. Because it's ridiculous, right? It's ridiculous. What do we think about John? That John. He's focused too much on like an exact minute.
All the
You say.
details, yeah.
Yeah. He's been incredibly pedantic and.
But very sweet of him.
I think John's got a gin and tonic ready at 10 to 7 and gone for 7:15.
Yeah. So people usually heckle with divorce, or has he not heard of a phone? Could he not check when she's coming back? But what is John doing wrong here?
He's assuming Mary's got a choice in what time she gets home.
Yeah, and of course she, to a point, she doesn't have a choice because she will broadly get home around about 7 o'clock. In the same way that, let's assume you start work at 8 a.m. If you get to work at 10 to 8, no one gives you a medal. If you turn up at 5 past, no one's giving you grief. I don't know, unless you're a surgeon. No, okay, bad example. Okay, let's assume you do a nice office job like me. No one's giving you grief, right? Because this is what's referred to as normal variation. It's just stuff that happens in the system. It does not require a knee-jerk reaction or any adverse attention. John really should just understand that Mary will get home about 7 and deal with it, right?
Dinner for half past.
Is
Let you have a glass of wine first.
Is there anything different in John's behaviour compared to the way we're running, we're providing assurance in hospitals, where we're looking at last month's data? So last month's data said this, and this month it says this, and we're having a performance conversation all of a sudden. Is there anything different conceptually about that? Of course there isn't. And it's just as ridiculous as the way John's behaving. Usually when we're working with exec boards on this, it gets uncomfortable because we realise how we're behaving, like at mass across this system. So
I think John should worry if Mary comes at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
That is when you start, that's what I always say. I'm not worried. I always told my consultant, up to 20% variation, I'm not worried, but beyond that, I will be worried. John should start worrying when Mary comes at 10 o'clock. Yes, that is the time where I got to get.
Yeah. So if Mary turns up at 10 o'clock, arguably 3 hours onto her commute, this is what we would call special cause variation. There must be an assignable reason for that happening. Maybe we don't want to know what it is, but there might be an assignable reason for what's going on there. It warrants a conversation in a way that 7 does not. Same with our services. And I guess the real question here is, at what point, where do we draw these boundaries, right? And statistical process control helps us to do that. So what John really should be doing is understanding that there's a tolerance. 15 minutes, give or take, above and below 7 o'clock. And he shouldn't really be getting too bothered unless it goes out of those red lines and she starts getting like, Okay. So a couple of vocabulary items. Spuddling. A real word, not made up. To make a lot of fuss around trivial things and to act as if they are important. And we share this joke with boards up and down the country because, of course, there's awkward points where what happens if your chief person in a field is giving you a red, amber, green chart, making a lot of fuss about something that's trivial. These are, and this is replicated at any level. There are senior people in the room who it can be difficult to challenge, and we need, as multidisciplinary teams, to be able to call that out when people are getting a bit like John was in that journey, making a lot of fuss and trivia about something that's not important. We need to be able to challenge that constructively. And what Sam Riley and her central team now have started to do is publish warning cards for spuddling. So we have boards and teams up and down the country now getting batches of these in team meetings where someone's having a ramble about how something's gone up from yesterday. Yellow card, spuddling warning for the camera, followed by a red card, spuddling warning. And we're seeing a few teams starting to use that now. And do it constructively with statistical process control. And of course, what John was doing was tampering. He was just changing his behaviour based on the last point. So look out for spuddlers, look out for people who are tampering and wasting your time and resources. That's what this ultimately comes down to. It's a waste of your time and resources to react.
It's called micromanagement.
It certainly is micromanagement.
Collecting ants, forgetting elephants.
Yeah. And hopefully statistical process control can help equip you with ammunition to counter this and not succumb to that pressure. And it's why we start at board level with this subject, to try and equip organisations from the top down in the way their performance reported. So final scenario, and then we'll go into some of your examples. So going to simulate some data. Just imagine this is in your service and this is relevant to you, and just tell me, what are you thinking? And this is where your school holidays point will come up. So serious incidences, we can see a timeline along the bottom there. We have 8 in our first month. And let's say you're at a monthly meeting on this subject. So the next month, or the next few months, 11, 19 incidences, 14, 15. Your head's on the line for this service.
How many patients were treated in that month? Because what's the proportion is internal proportion, say procedure practice.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Pick a number. 100.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then we have school holidays. So now we've got 2 bank holidays. June might just be a knock-on effect. July, August.
So as a manager, you're potentially saying I've got less staff, more risk,
Yeah.
incidences might be going up. Are you using that to explain the situation, or and are you ultimately saying it's okay? I know why it's happening. No, but we're just pretending.
But yeah. To explain it, I suppose.
Yeah.
If you're having to talk to somebody above you.
Is anybody in the room feeling like they need to mobilise resources to do something about this, or are you just monitoring at this stage?
No.
So you feel compelled to do something. You'd have done something in April. Yeah. Okay. I mean, these are human beings, right? At the end of the day. So regardless of the number, 100,000, million, percentage, still 8 people, still 11 people. Maybe we're getting very worried about all of this. Okay.
You don't know at this point in time. We've only got 6 months. You don't know that that's just a one-off. If it happens next July, the July after that, then you could say it was.
Okay. So over here, we need more information.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need more information or more data. Is that? Yeah. Yeah. So we'll give you some more data. I've just put a median line through at the moment because this is what's technically just a run chart. We'll turn it into an SPC in a moment, but that's a median line I've just added on. Just a point on linear trend lines, and we'll get to your data in a second. From Sam's team, they're telling me to tell people that as a general rule of thumb, don't use linear trend lines in your data. We'll stick one on to prove the point. If that linear trend line proves correct, what are those incidences going to do over the next? Yeah, they're going to do that. If we imagine the reverse situation, they're hypothetically going to hit 0. You know, we all know incidences of any nature in any field are never going to hit 0 reliably. I don't think. I'll stand by that. And are going to hit 0 reliably. It would be foolish to believe a linear trend line in that circumstance. So as a rule of thumb, don't put linear trend lines through your data. Really misleading, really unhelpful. And I'll show you how someone's done that in radiotherapy in a moment. Let's add some more data. So 9, 14, 12, 5. We've got the lowest recorded value to date. What are we thinking?
Can I add a banner in the box?
Sure.
I happen to know that there isn't a really good definition for serious incidents, and these are reported, as in not actual. So you're reliant on people reporting and someone deciding the threshold. And if you tell them off for it, they'll report fewer, or they might move the threshold.
Yeah,
it's easy to do.
Yeah.
So you could actually have all sorts of things going on.
Absolutely. So it's a similar point. There's more going on here that we need to know. We need to know more about. Generally speaking, are we as worried now as we were 5-6 months ago, or just as worried?
Encouraged it's going down.
So we'd be forgiven for being encouraged that it's going. We've had our lowest data point. Maybe we're even going down to that department and employee of the month, ward of the quarter, or whatever we're doing. Maybe they're doing some excellent work there. Okay. Let's add some more data. 9, 10, 14, 15. Next monthly meeting.
Someone would be saying it's tripled since January.
Yeah, I bet they would. Yeah. You've gone from 5 to 15 in what's that like 5 months. Do you hold your ground and say no? I'm just going to monitor the situation, or do you buckle and hire a project manager and create a work stream?
What's the national trend?
So yeah, so maybe we want some context with other
From a
services.
central experience, you'd have a room full of people who'd look at that if that was presented and they're just gonna go, and that genuinely be about it.
Yeah.
You just, but it is what it is. Goes up sometimes, goes down sometimes.
Okay, so you're saying
It'd be a bit of a
you're basically saying Mary comes home to work around 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. You're saying write the good with the bad. Okay.
It's a dangerous business.
Yeah. Okay. Let's add some more. 15. I think if my slides work with me, I'm going to turn this into an SPC chart. Yeah, there we go. So I've now got enough data points to create a statistical process control chart. So I've put that data into an SPC chart, and that's now allowed me to add an upper control limit and a lower control limit, which you can see as the grey lines there. Does that influence our context at all? No, over here.
The variation is too great, isn't it? Really.
So you want
21 to 3.
you want a way more predictable
I'd like to
set of
bring
data. Yeah. So even if it's
Yes.
bad, you want it to be predictably bad.
No,
No.
predictably level, but at a low level.
Well, that's
You want
of
to bring
course.
it
Yeah.
lower, but not at such a wide band of tolerance.
So you're saying reduce the variation first, make it more predictable, and then we try and improve.
So I think
Which makes sense.
Yeah, well, I'd like, my first starting point would be to try and find out why you have that variation. So yes, I guess so.
Okay.
Reduce the variation.
Okay. And I don't want to put you on the spot. Where would you be looking for? Are you looking now that we're in June 2016 there, or are you looking back in August 2015, or across the whole?
8 to
spectrum?
19 is a trigger point.
Okay.
Myself.
So you would have been looking way back in the early
so,
days.
Yes,
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think most people would.
Okay. Right. Let's for argument's sake say that we did buckle, and we said, oh, okay, we're not happy with this situation. I'll implement an improvement project, a change. We'll do something about this. So we implement a project to reduce serious incidences where that line is. And the next month, we find that we have 7 serious incidences. And the month after that, we have 6. And the month after that, we have 8. What are we thinking at this stage?
break out the champagne.
Break out the champagne.
Yeah, 3 months below.
Start writing that journal entry.
Yeah. It's all good.
Medals all round. Another month of 8, you're even more confident
Pizza
now.
for everyone.
Yeah. 7.
Patient numbers might have halved in that period. You really can't. You've got no idea what.
Okay, so you're holding the celebrations,
Yeah,
putting
putting
the corks back in the wine,
Yeah.
poo-pooing the party. You want more data. Okay. 4. You're not buckling. Okay. 5. Okay. It raises the question: at what point do we declare a success? Right? At what point do we declare improvement? At what point do we continue to monitor any number of conclusions around this data? And we'll cover that in a moment. The great thing about statistical process control and the charts and the stuff that we share through Excel is it will flag it up and automatically tell you when that point is. And generally speaking, we recommend 7 data points. 7 data points in a row that are getting better or worse. We generally recommend the flag for special cause. And when you see 7, that's when you hit send to BMJ. Not with 2 data points. Okay. And of course, that's not a hard and fast rule, context specific, but generally speaking, we work with 7. And I think that's going to just change color there. And the SPC chart is flagging to me something significant has happened here that has improved the service. Now, all of this was a massive ruse, because what I was actually showing you were Beatles #1 hits. And these are just Beatles #1 hits. And before I did the improvement idea, I was just counting the letters in the title, just the letters in the title. That's all those numbers are. And then when I changed the system fundamentally, instead of counting the letters in the title, what I counted was the consonants only in the title. So I fundamentally changed the rules. And because I fundamentally changed the rules, I effectively changed the system that we were playing in, which caused the special cause variation on the chart. Just to show you that all an SPC chart will do is detect the special cause variation. It won't tell you why or what's going on. It won't tell you that everyone was on holiday or whatever. And when we run this often, what the other sort of key learning point here is we find that when we're looking at an eyeballing time series data, what we tend to do is bring our baggage and our knowledge and our stories and our history towards that. So, you know, I remember when I was working in this hospital 2 years ago and all the doctors took summer leave at the same time and the waiting list went through the ceiling. They must be up to that again or whatever. Yeah, we bring our baggage, and it's just a sort of a warning, really, not to bring that baggage when you're looking at time series data. The only way to really know is to go and actually look. And we run this with boards, and they'll swear blind that data is doing something for some reason. Coronavirus, you know, medical handover, all sorts of things. When we show them that it was just Beatles #1 hits, they realise that actually that sort of personal baggage is unhelpful. If you want to know, you've got to go and find out. But you only go and look where there's special cause variation. Okay. So, if it's helpful, there is a really strong evidence base around the use of statistical process control. It's not just Sam and me having a jolly around the country running seminars. There's tons of evidence out there that supports the usage of this. We've just, as an NHS, fallen out of practice, really, and succumbed to target chasing. There's loads of evidence out there, and if you're ever interested, drop me a line or follow the Plot the Dots on Twitter, and we can signpost you literature if that's helpful or it helps make your case. And I'll just make a point here around the CQC. The CQC are now specifically inspecting for this kind of practice in services. And the really nice news is we're not delivering these seminars because the CQC inspect for it. It's rather the other way around. We helped work with the CQC and influence their inspection criteria, so they're looking for the right thing. And they do that through the well-led domain. So when you've got a well-led inspection in your organization, they will be looking for evidence of use around statistical process control. And I'll just zoom in a bit. What they're specifically looking for is understanding of your services using time series data based on an understanding of variation. And the fine print at the bottom basically says, don't use red, amber, green tables. Please don't use pie charts or any of that business. Preferably use some sort of system that understands special cause variation. And we would recommend SPC for that. So if it's of any use as a bit of leverage in your organization, just know that CQC do look for this. Okay, so I'll very quickly just cover the components of an SPC chart. You've got your data in time series, chronological order from left to right. The line through the center is the mean, not the median, it's the mean. And then when we put it into the software, it automatically calculates an upper and a lower control limit. We don't really need to go into too much detail at this stage, but the upper and lower control limit is based on 3 sigma above the mean and 3 sigma below the mean. What's really important to understand with an SPC chart is that 99% of all the data, give or take, lies below that upper and that lower control limit. And if we remember back to John and Mary with their 7 o'clock and that sort of window of tolerance, 99% of Mary's journeys are going to land between 7:15, 7:15. And it's that less than 1% that we're looking out for, that coming back at 10 p.m. that requires attention. And just remember this when we look at some more examples, that when you see the upper and lower control limit, just over 99% of all the data will fall in that boundary. So in other words, when it doesn't, something's going on that requires attention. And we generally recommend about 15 to 20 data points before you can do an SPC chart. Anything less than that, you're really putting it into a simple run chart, just data in time series with a median line through. But when you get 15 to 20 points, you can put it in, copy and paste it into an SPC chart, stick a mean line through it, and put some lower control limits on it. And so if you don't have those data points, either we look at something in more detail, so we turn months into weeks to get more data points, or we have to wait. We don't jump to conclusions. There are a number of rules, statistical rules, that sit behind SPC software. You don't really have to learn them, but you do have to trust them. When these rules are broken, and I can share these around. These are you can Google these rules. They're around. When these rules are broken, it will say that there is special cause variation. There's Mary coming home at 10 o'clock. Needs your attention, your focus, and it will flag it up on the SPC chart with color. And of course, this can happen in a good way or in a bad way. SPC doesn't really differentiate; just tells you something significant is going on. The most easy one to look out for is that top left, an astronomical point. So if a data point lands outside of those control limits, it's in that less than 1%, it's significant. The most difficult one to eyeball is that top right one. Quite difficult to do that without a lot of practice. But trends are fairly intuitive, the one on the bottom right there. You see a run of 7, it's fairly easy to see that. Ultimately, it doesn't matter, because the SPC software will flag it with color and tell you. Okay. But all you need to know is that when they flag, a rule's been broken, there is special cause variation, and it requires your attention. Something significant's gone on. And in the rest of the world, where it's not flagging up, Mary is just coming home at 7 o'clock. Yeah, life's just ticking along. I won't go into that. Just to say, we're using 7 data points as a baseline. Wait till it happens 7 times before we declare it special cause. You can, of course, start diving into detail much sooner. It's essentially a question of risk. The more data points you have in a trend, the more confidence you have that something is happening. And the less you have, the less confidence you have. Just depends how much time and space you've got to run around investigating everything. Yeah. And this just shows, some of the probability. So if you've only got a trend of 2 data points, so an improvement of 2 things getting better, there's a 25% chance that that's happened due to special cause. Yeah. 25%, 1 in 4. You wouldn't bet your mortgage on a 1 in 4 odds. You'd want to be going down to 7 data points, like a 0.8%. Much more. You'd be much more confident with that. Okay. So what does this mean in our services? So there's no color on this chart. This is just normal variation. This is just Mary getting home at 7 o'clock. Let's assume up is good. And the target is at 40 there. In this situation, I should just point out the control limits. Do you see the lower control limit here and the upper control limit, that grey line there? Yeah. Do you remember I said 99% of the data will land between those points? What chance do you have of ever hitting that target in that system? Well, less than 1%. To put a number on it, you've got a less than 1% chance. So your chief operating officer, your divisional manager is saying, well, you're off target, sunshine. Let's not be off target. Get it. I want to see your improvement plan. What are you doing? What are we changing? The real answer here is to say, well, Mary's just getting home at 7 o'clock. She's not magically just going to get home at 5. All right? Something fundamental has to change. And ultimately, you're doing what would be termed, I guess, a transformation project. This is business case territory, fundamental change. It's very unlikely you're just going to PDSA your way out of that. Yeah? Or very unlikely that people can just work harder or work better out of that situation. Not in a sustainable way. This is case for redesigning a system. Okay? And of course, A&E performance fits into this example. Yeah? Fundamental change is required. And as decision makers, as managers, we either understand that and park it for when we do have time and resources and money, or we find that time and resources and money, but we can't. There isn't really a middle ground in this area. So we see this a lot. Another example, we've got normal cause variation, Mary coming home at 7 o'clock, but the target is below, a bit like those mental health metrics I showed you, where we had that sea of green. The system here, the process, the service, is reliably hitting that target. 99% of the time, the data will land. Do you see the laser on there? I don't see it.
Yeah, it's green.
Yeah, it seems to disappear when it goes on the screen, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's the surface of the screen.
I'll stop trying. But 99% of the data is landed within this controller. It's always going to be on target. You might get very unlucky, less than 1% of the time, but you can pretty much sleep at the wheel on that service. Yeah, it's going to reliably hit the target. And it certainly doesn't require a performance meeting every week or month in that case. It's a waste of your time. Unfortunately, what we often find ourselves in is a situation that looks like this, where the target is right in the middle of our data set, and our upper and lower control limits are above and below our target. So what's happening here, just to check in with you? There or thereabouts most of the time, exactly. Are you confident when you come in, say you run this service, when you come into work next month, do you think you're going to be on target? Precisely, yeah. Shrug your shoulders, might be. Yeah, exactly. And that's absolutely the answer. You might be on target sometimes, you might not be. It's the same as asking Mary, are you going to be home at 7 o'clock tomorrow? Might be. Depends on normal variables in the system. Okay, so you have absolutely no assurance that you're going to be on target here. But what we often see in our services, assuming up is good, is awards being handed out above the target, investigations and projects being initiated when we're below the target, and we're up down. We don't know where we stand. Incredibly inefficient. Lots of time and resources being spent when actually Mary's just coming home at 7 o'clock. Doesn't require a reaction every time. So from a management perspective, I completely agree. Shrug my shoulders. Sometimes we'll be on target, sometimes we won't. If it's a really big deal that we're off target, then we clearly need to do something here and bring our variation above target. If it's not a big deal, then we cope with it. That's our normal, and we don't spuddle and tamper around it. So it won't reliably hit the target. This is what a really good SPC chart looks like. This is Sheffield Teaching Hospitals. This is, I believe, a length of stay key performance indicator. Are you smiling? Are you from Sheffield? I just basking in the glow of a good SPC chart. This is length of stay, and what you can see here is they're showing the variation around length of stay in that service. You notice the timeline's massive. It's like 2012 to 15. They've got a 3-year timeline. They're not segmenting years as if they're totally unconnected. And what they're also doing is recalculating control limits. So as they try an improvement and they make a fundamental change, they're changing the new normal. Yeah. And you can see that length of stay is getting better and better. And to your point earlier, you see that variation is reducing. So you've got it all over the place between length of stay between 3 and 8 days. In the early days, they've reduced variation to between 2 and 5 days, and then finally between, what's that, like 1 and 1.5 days at the end there. And what's also really useful is they're annotating the chart. So even if you know nothing about that service or length of stay, if you were a layman, a patient, a non-exec, at least you can ask them, oh, what was that AR expansion intervention that you made? I don't even know what that means, but you can at least ask an informed question. And so I'd really encourage you to annotate SPC as well, so that people around your service can understand what's going on. So just a point of best practice that we share with teams, you're looking for 4 core components of an SPC chart. So time series data, use color to navigate the eye to important special cause quickly. Add really constructive narrative that's helpful. So you remember at the very beginning, it was like up 0.4%. It's really unhelpful. What I need to know is, am I on target, yes or no? And is my system in control, yes or no? Is there special cause? That's what I really need to know. Not is Bruce telling me that this month is bigger than last month. And finally, if you've got lots of KPIs, lots of measures, it's good to dashboard this, because in a big dashboard of 100 metrics, you want to be attracted to maybe the 5 SPC charts that warrant your attention, and you can glaze over the grey. And we say this to boards as much as we would divisions and services. Makes sense to follow this. And we provide templated free tools to allow you to do this. So we'll look at your data in the next slide, not this one. What we often see at most levels are a combination of everything going on. So a bit like this trust, you can see like lengthy paper reports that just describe stuff in the top left corner. Charts, like I showed you in the early examples, were just massive raw data sets. Narrative descriptions in the bottom right, so huge varying degrees of quality, and data in time series, as you see in the bottom left, mixed in with the odd bar chart, the odd pie chart, and all sorts of things that Excel will let you do. So I asked some of you to send. So the point on that slide is just to say, is it all supporting each other? Is the time series data supporting the narrative, supporting the the board report, supporting the charts? So this is now data that you guys submitted to me. So we don't need to worry about who sent what and all the rest of it. But this is radiotherapy data. Okay. So one of you was kind enough to send your data around incidences. And I understand now that you have level 1 to level 5 types of incidences, and this is what came into my inbox. So reflecting back on the first part of the session, I showed you similar tables, didn't I? Yeah, and it's going to give you similar problems when you're trying to draw conclusions. But in this case, they also sent me an accompanying chart to show me how they might interpret that data. So we're looking at just level 5 incidences here. I'll put the red arrow at the bottom. It's that column of data. They've put it into that chart, and that's currently how they review incidences, to my knowledge. What's it telling us? Curiously, it didn't come with any narrative. So the assumption is you look at the chart and are informed.
They put a line across, haven't they?
Yeah, they've put a linear trend line in.
So they say it's going to go up.
And the linear trend line is just slightly creeping uphill. Yeah. And so I guess your conclusion is level 5 incidences are creeping up, presumably. We're presented with that chart in that format. So we stuck it into an SPC chart. It looks like that. Now, a couple of caveats here. That chart is only showing January 19 to December 2019. So remember I was talking about how this segment years as if they're not connected. So what I've done is taken as much data as was available in that red, amber, green chart, taken the whole column of data and whacked it into the SPC chart. So how many data points there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, like 12 data points. So that chart probably represents 1, 2, 3. It's like that data there is that chart. What I've done is given it some context with the rest of the table, just copied that into an SPC chart. What's it telling us? Or what are you feeling when you look at the SPC chart?
They've gone down.
Yeah,
Fairly consistent.
Yeah, they've gone down, and they're consistently, arguably, sustainably, they've gone down. So on our software, when I say software, it's just Excel, right? It's just Excel. It flags up special cause variation. Orange is bad, special cause variation. Blue is good, special cause variation. And clearly, up and down can be good or bad, depending on the metric, right? So in this case, blue means good special cause variation. So just eyeballing that, I can see a load of blue, really positive special cause variation that's showing me that level 5 incidences in that service have sustainably gone down when we compare it to the context of what's probably the last 3 years.
My other breakdown is saying, if I look at that from Jan 16 to December 19, maybe staff got a bit flipping it, we're not doing very well on level 5 and aren't reporting. Because I would have thought of all of those levels, level 5 is probably the most unreliably reported.
Yeah. And the reason I picked level 5, because level 5 is like less serious, right? Yeah. The reason I picked level 5 is clearly, if I showed you level 1, presumably you just investigate everything. Everything is special calls, right? Yeah. So it's unhelpful. So I just showed you level 5, assuming that maybe you don't investigate everything. Maybe you do. But absolutely. So you're raising a key point here. SPC charts will only show you special cause variation depending on the data you put in them. It won't tell you about your people or why any of this is going on. It's just focusing your attention. So yes, absolutely, you're sort of saying people have been a bit blasé maybe, or losing interest in the reporting. Yeah, a completely valid point, but just beware, that could be a Beatles #1 hit example, yeah? Might be happening, might not. The only way is to just go and find out. Yeah, go and see, walk the walk, talk to your service, look at data in more detail. Might be a perfectly valid assumption, but it is just an assumption.
I know in my office, we didn't write down any errors for a couple of months because we thought, can't see the folder. Somebody's nicked our folder. People who usually nick them for the monthly analysis, it's not there.
Yeah.
So the old folder was blue, it got a bit raggedy, somebody had changed it, given it a nice little thing. We didn't spot it. It's been there for months and months and months.
Yeah.
We haven't written down any level 5 things because it's
Well, this is another thing. It might be that the level 5 incidences are just not worth your time and effort. I don't work in radiotherapy, but it might, and there will be metrics in your service. I'm assuming not level 5 instances from the backlash there, but there'll be metrics that don't warrant your attention. They're not important to you as a service, as in all walks of life. And of course, there's a point here around there's balancing metrics that you want to check off against this. Don't look at an SPC chart in isolation. Rarely do that. You might want to check it against other metrics. You might want to compare it to staffing, turnover, vacancies, things like that. Yeah. See if there's any stories to be told there. Yeah. Just to check with you, is the SPC chart more helpful than the chart above it? And is that more helpful than the red, amber, green chart? I'm totally open to critique. Yeah, and all I'm trying to do really is show you a concept. It's just a concept. I'm not going to micromanage how you look at your data. It's just a concept. Take your data, copy and paste it into SPC charts. Let's look at some more. So somebody sent me this, a bit like some of our early examples, right? And as somebody not involved in radiotherapy, I panicked a bit and wasn't quite sure what to do with that. There was no accompanying chart with this at all. So my only assumption is that whoever's making decisions with this information is just eyeballing that spreadsheet. Can I just check with you? Does that happen in your services? Do you find yourselves eyeballing spreadsheets and trying to draw conclusions without a picture chart in any way? So that is normal. Okay, it's horrifying, but it's
it's only copied into a more sort of friendly format.
Yeah.
It gets quite often tables of
from
information presented.
It's from a patient management system.
Yeah, usually.
We can't,
And it gets exported as a spreadsheet, and you're just sort of left with that.
That's where we go with it.
Okay, and then if you've had a hard day, or something more important walks in the door, I guess a bit like our early examples, you have to leave that by the wayside. Okay, so this is showing check-in to treatment time, and I've just whacked it into an SPC chart. So check-in to treatment. I'll just explain a few things so that we can understand it better. So on the left, you've obviously got 0, the appointment time, and then below 0 is the patient turning up early. Patient turning up early is the one, and after 0 is the amount of time they're waiting post the appointment time. So there are a number of cases shown by the special cause blue where the patient turned up early and was seen before their time. which is why they're being flagged up as blue beforehand. I think there's a strong case to just ignore the blue special cause, because that's just a patient turn up early and being seen. Attention really should be focused on the special cause variation where patients are waiting longer than normal to be seen. So you can see we've put control limits on there. There's an upper and a lower control limit. And remember I said 99% of your data set will land between those control limits. And that's why we've got that one patient flagging up a 80 something minute wait. Something definitely happened there. Broke one of the SPC rules. But then we've also seen SPC rules being broken with the other orange dots that you might not have, well, you certainly wouldn't have eyeballed looking at that. And through SPC, it just jumps out. It's really nice. And then we can make some quick assumptions. Oh yeah, that's when Dave went to A&E because he slipped over or whatever. Or we might want to investigate what happened.
Can you just ask? You've got that cluster of orange dots.
Yeah.
There. Why aren't the next two peaks orange?
Are you talking about? Are you talking about that data point and that data point? So if you're looking at them as astronomical points, they're not orange because they're within your control limits.
Well, so
They're just normal data points of variation.
So that orange cluster.
Well, so technically they're not. They're I agree. They're not. Those are not astronomical points. But do you remember I showed you that slide with 4 different rules? That would. Oh, no, don't worry about it. No.
I feel like I'm being a bit tense.
No. You're absolutely not being dense at all. Not at all. Let's go back to our rules. So they're not. I agree. They're not astronomical points because they're within normal quarters variation. And even without knowing anything about SPC, what we can be confident about is that yes, that rule's not being broken. I agree with you. So it's probably one of these 3. Now, when we looked at it, it didn't look like a trend, did it? There wasn't a line doing that. It was like a bit of a busy cluster. So it's not that, and it's not that. It probably means something like that's going on,
Okay, so
or something like that's going on.
And then those two are...
Yeah. You only need one rule to break for it to be called special cause and for it to flag up.
Thank you.
No, it's fine. The really good news is you don't have to memorize those rules, and you don't really have to understand them. If I'm perfectly honest, you just need to trust them in a way that you trust pi as a number. You don't have to know how that's calculated, but you believe it. Yeah. Sounds a bit like John. Oh, well, I'm skipping here. So where was I? We were here, weren't we? So yes, I agree. There's no astronomical point, but probably that second or that third rule has been broken. And really, I'd probably want to zoom into that a bit closer to know. Yeah. Good news is the software will just flag it for you. Yeah. That point there. Oh, you can't see it. You see the astronomical point, the 2 orange ones to the left of it. So my gut feels to me that's rule 2 that's been broken. The one that was in the top right corner of those rules. Yeah. And we could run a whole separate session on what rules are and what they mean and why they are what they are. But this is where historically we've tied ourselves up in knots, where we've tried to make this the domain of the analyst. And actually, it really doesn't matter. You just need to know there is special cause variation. Because the SPC, either way, the SPC won't tell you why. It won't tell you why. Only humans can go and look at stuff to know why. So don't worry about that too much. Okay, so I'm way out of my depth now. So something called beam output change percentage. So this was the data set that got sent over. Is this an important metric?
Yeah. So it's how much radiation comes out of our machines relative to a reference.
So to a calibration.
Kind of like 1 for 1, and you want it to be within a couple of %.
Oh, okay, so this might be horrifying. let's see where we go. So I've got two KPIs there: beam output change percentage in the middle, and then the right-hand column is beam uniformity change percentage. And I just whacked them into SPC to see what happens. So my understanding from the person that sent it was that that's how it's looked at. You check it like that, as just like a raw data set. But they did then follow up and say, well, sometimes we look at it in this form, which might be really helpful. You might have been working with these sorts of charts for years. This might tell you everything. So the output change percentage and the uniformity change percentage is the orange and the green on that chart. So we're looking at the orange and the green. Without knowing radiotherapy, I would look at the green and go, looks like a trend, an increasing trend. So maybe that is quite helpful. But again, I don't know if it's a significant trend or just something slowly creeping up. The orange, I frankly don't know what to do with. I don't know if that's helpful to you, but it means nothing to me. It almost looks like it almost looks like waves of birds in the sky flying as well when I see that.
So machines will periodically recalibrate as something approaches its tolerance. So that may be when you see things sort of drifting out, heading off towards out of tolerance. There'll be a recalibration, and then we'll sort of snap back down to around 0, and then it might.
Okay. And these tolerance levels are going to be key, and I haven't put them on the SPC chart, so it'd be good to know where they are. When I whack it onto SPC, it looks like that. So all I've done there is copy that middle column, output change, pasted it into an SPC chart, and it did that. So as somebody that doesn't work in radiotherapy at all, I can see that there was three major patterns of special cause variation. I would expect this to just sort of do what Mary does around 7 o'clock, bounce around. But there were sustained periods of time where you know, as you can see there in the blue and the orange. The key is the tolerance limit. So do you know them off the top of your head without putting it on the spot?
Generally, all centres would stay within 3%, and they probably have an action level around 2.5.
Ah, okay, around 2. Okay, so you can see there the scale on the left, 0 goes up to just over 2%. You can see that it's within your 3% limit, so presumably, and this is where context is key, special cause is being flagged, but actually it's not significant for your tolerances. But you say that there's maybe action from 2%?
Yeah, particularly if something's trending upwards.
So
you might pick it up early and then.
And we actually have a case of that. So you can see here, stand there. So you see that this did sort of trend upwards for a period of time, and actually there are probably 4 data points that went above 2%. Now maybe that happens all the time, and you don't lose sleep over it. Maybe it would have been helpful to see that and go and check the the register or the sort of maintenance schedule and see if anything was going on with that. Maybe.
As a physicist, are you worried by that, or do you see that and think, oh, it went above the 2, they did an output?
So what I think you'll be seeing is looking at some day-to-day variation. And what you don't want to do is have one measurement that might be out of tolerance. Oh, God, it's wrong. Well, basically, you don't want to chase it like John did with Mary.
Yeah, just from one data point. Yeah.
Give it a little bit of time, and actually, what you see off those 2 high points, it naturally sort of drops back down by itself, just within the sort of the variation of the lines that you see. And it's only once they've got this bit where they're coming, oh, actually, you know what, it is clustering up near that 2, from between 1.5 and 2% high. Actually, we need to systematically bring it back down.
Yeah. And the other thing I just had is, remember 99% of your data lands between your control limits. This is your upper control limit, this grey line at the top. So 99% of your data is going to go below that. And it's just a question of, you know, is it okay for it to bounce out of that seven times in the last however many months? And, you know, of course, that's specialism context specific. Maybe we're happy with that. Maybe it's fine.
Well, one of the things that is interesting is this centre, and it doesn't look dissimilar from information at my centre. They're systematically over-treating their patients by almost 1%, which clinically isn't very significant, but there's a systematically they're giving it, if you're being really technical about it, a little bit too much radiation for patients. So their you should bobble above and below your target. So
it's better to give someone slightly less occasionally than it is to give everybody too much.
So in this case, the 0% target isn't something to be beaten, it's something to be matched to. So you want 50% above, 50% below, with ideally a pretty tight tolerance either side of it.
And this is for you. You don't need to. A lot of that goes over my head. You don't feel like you need to explain to you, but this is for you. There'll be times where this is useful and times where it's not. So the other one I put through was the uniformity change percentage. They look like that when I did it. Is your tolerance the same with that, or are you looking for 0?
I think you would be looking for 0.
My understanding was you were looking for 0, so I stuck a red target line on 0, because presumably you don't want any change percentage on that, I think. Yeah. If we're not sure, let's assume 0 is where we want to be, for argument's sake. So we know that the uniformity change percentage will not always be 0, in the way that Mary will not always get home at precisely 7 p.m. My next question would be: are those 3 predominant patches of special cause variation in your context important to you? Maybe it's perfectly normal for uniformity change percentage to always be under 1% and we don't lose any sleep. Maybe it's fine. Or maybe we ask and say, well, how come it was consistently low in the blue at the beginning and then consistently high in the middle and then changed and was consistently low again? And maybe it was those corrections.
I've been wondering what happened 10 data points in that it looks to have systematically jumped.
Yeah. And this is an important point. You're wondering what happened, and this metric or any other metric, what's really important is that you know what happened if you're accountable for that service. And so on your SPC chart, you would just have annotations. So yeah, we did something here with when orange turned to blue, and I know what it was, and I'm not just hoping for the best in the future. It's just between wondering and knowing. An annotation for SPC charts. Anybody else?
One of the physicists just, you're correct, like we're trying to seek 0 for the uniformity change, but it's not realistic.
Yeah, in the same way that it's not realistic Mary's going to turn up at 7 o'clock every day. Yeah. So we're aiming for 0. Okay. So without knowing anything about the service, I find it odd that it's not just ticking along. It seems like things are shifting, and if we don't know why they're shifting, yeah, I personally would want to know why things are shifting to a degree of special cause.
As a radiotherapy there's no way I would have got that from that.
No, and that's the point. And all I'm really doing is I'm just showing you a concept here. You can copy and paste data into SPC charts in a lot of instances. And in all of the instances, it gives you a way better picture than that does, and certainly a better picture than that does. And it at least allows you, if you're short of time and resource, to make a more informed question.
That sort of chart, really, if you were sitting in a room and having to defend or explain what you're doing, I think that type of chart is sort of more people could understand what's going on.
I hope so. And ultimately, if we're trying to run and improve a service as a multidisciplinary team, we all need to be able to walk in and have a semi-informed point about what we're talking about, and not just defer to the specialist for everything every time. Yeah.
Especially if you put your trust, like you say, in the colour, really, in the colour blobs.
Yeah.
I think that's right. Want to know.
Am I done for time?
Well, we're 15 minutes over. But,
sorry. I'll wrap this up very quickly because I'm eating into your lunch. Excuse the pun. Right. So I won't cover control limits. A very quick point. If any of you using rolling 12-month averages in any of your performance reporting, a bit like the linear trend line, just don't. They're really sloppy because, of course, at any given point, 11 of those 12 data points are the same as they were the preceding month. So you have to run the data a lot longer before that massive ship does any kind of movement. Really, I'm like, just generally don't do them. Moving on, I was going to run an example where rolling averages are really unhelpful. The top shows rolling averages, the bottom is an SPC chart, and they directly match each other. So this data point that's showing staff sickness decreasing with special cause variation is directly matched to that point on the rolling average. So whilst your rolling average is saying sickness was going up, the SPC is saying actually it was going down. It can literally tell you the opposite to what's actually going on. Equally, that data point is showing staff sickness going through the roof, whilst the rolling average was saying it was just doing its thing, just ticking along. Equally there, it's showing normal cause variation, nothing happening. The rolling average was actually showing you an increase in staff sickness. Rolling averages are a nightmare. Just reject them. And that's a point to show you around not using SPC in isolation. If you know that KPIs metrics are associated, try to dashboard them so they're related, so that you can look at reporting rates with incidence rates at the same time, and staffing and that stuff. Bunch them up. And if you're interested in looking this in a provider setting, I'll just close by saying the best practice today is at Kettering DGH for doing this at a provider. But there are tens of providers up and down the country that are doing this very well. And if you ever want to see that in practice, just drop us a line and we'll tell you who's close to you. And if you want more support on this, we have like free guidebooks that will sort of show you most of what I've talked about today. Twitter's the best place for the network to find like-minded people that are trying to wrestle with this from board to ward level in a multitude of specialties. And to say that we have chief financial officers applying this to finance metrics, HR directors applying this to HR metrics, ops managers with their performance data, and maybe radiotherapists applying it to radiotherapy data in the future. But that's me finished. Sorry for going over time. I'll close that. Thank you.
If you're interested, like, in, to find out more, or like, put your dot so that we can gauge how much interest we have in our community. Shall we go and for a quick lunch now, and then we can come back. So sorry, the lunch will be a bit short, but if we can come back around.
Shut him up.
And Simon can walk us through the.
Oh, some good comments there for you.
I hope that's useful. Very silent.
Oh, Isabel's got a comment.
Okay, so.
Let's come back around home. We can have like a few of the 4 minutes here and there, but we're trying to stick to.
So we're going to be back at 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
I'm just going to put it on mute so that you're not getting the noises, and I'll stop the video as well. And then when we get back at 2 o'clock, I'll start it all up again. See you in a minute.